I still remember the way the silence felt heavier than the cake I never got to blow candles on. It was supposed to be my birthday, the one day out of the entire year where I didn't have to compete with anyone, where I could feel seen, even cherished. The table was already set, I had picked out the dress I wanted to wear, and for once, I let myself believe my parents would follow through on their promises. But then, just like every other time in my life, the phone call came. My sister had a date, an ordinary evening for her, but suddenly monumental in my parents' eyes. Without hesitation, they canceled everything. My balloons, the reservations, the small spark of joy I had been holding on to. Just like that, my birthday was erased, brushed aside as though it were disposable, all so she could go out smiling on someone else's arm. And as I stood there clutching the dress against my chest in an empty room, I knew something inside me had shifted forever. Because if my own family could discard me so easily, maybe it was time I learned how to disappear on my own terms. This time not as their forgotten daughter, but as the one who decided when to walk away. I didn't cry that night, though I wanted to. The little girl in me who used to wait by the window for them to come home with balloons or a small cake kept tugging at my chest, begging for tears. But the grown woman in me had finally had enough. My parents had made it a pattern, not just a single mistake. Every achievement of mine was always overshadowed by my sister's needs, her wants, her drama. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one whose bad grades were excused with, "she's just stressed," while mine were treated as laziness if they weren't perfect. If she wanted new shoes, my parents would find a way to buy them, even if it meant borrowing from the money I had saved from part-time jobs. If she failed a class, I was asked to tutor her, no matter how exhausted I was from my own studies. And if I ever dared to complain, my parents' sharp line was always the same: be understanding, she needs more than you do. On my birthday, that line came back to haunt me. I asked, why can't she move her date? It's once a year for me. And my mother's voice, calm but cold, answered, Madeline, don't be selfish. She finally found someone worth her time, and we can celebrate you any other day. Any other day. Those words carved into me like glass. To them, I was always the placeholder, the background character in my sister's story. But what they didn't realize was that by choosing her over me yet again, they weren't just canceling a party. They were canceling the last shred of loyalty I felt toward them. I quietly went into my room, shut the door, and sat with the silence. No decorations, no laughter, no cake. Just me and a decision forming in the back of my mind, sharper than any knife they had unknowingly handed me over the years. They thought I would just accept it, that I would swallow down the disappointment like I always had. But this time, I wasn't going to be the silent daughter. This time, they were going to learn what it feels like when I finally decide to cancel something too. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a cheerful text from my sister. Hope you don't mind, but Mom and Dad said they'll make it up to you next weekend. Last night was amazing. You'll understand when it's your turn. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. My turn? My entire life had been about waiting my turn, only to watch it never come. The cruel irony was that she truly believed I would smile, nod, and say, "It's fine, I get it." But I didn't get it anymore. What I got was the truth. My family had no intention of ever treating me as an equal. To them, my value existed only in how well I could support my sister's shine. So I sat down at my desk and pulled out a notebook where I'd been scribbling half-thoughts for months, small observations of their behavior, little betrayals I had once tried to dismiss, borrowed money that was never returned, my car shared without asking until it broke down, my father co-signing a credit card for my sister but refusing when I asked for the same help, birthdays, graduations, even job interviews. All things I had faced alone because somehow her social calendar always demanded more attention. Reading through my own notes was like looking at a map of neglect. The pattern was undeniable and it was suffocating me. That was when the idea struck me. If they could treat me as disposable, maybe it was time to show them what it feels like to lose the steady presence they had taken for granted. I started looking at apartments that day, scrolling through listings with shaking fingers, realizing that the thought of leaving no longer scared me. It thrilled me. They believed I was tethered to them, bound by obligation and guilt. They had no idea that I'd been quietly saving, tucking away every dollar I could, even lying when my mother asked if I had extra cash for groceries. I wasn't rich, but I had enough to start over, enough to walk out without looking back. As I closed the notebook, one line glared back at me, one I had written in a particularly raw moment months ago. Family is only family when they choose you too. And I realized my choice had already been made. I tested the waters before making my move. A week after my canceled birthday, my parents acted as if nothing had happened. My mom asked me to help my sister pick an outfit for another date, as though the memory of that night hadn't seared into me like acid. I looked at her calmly and said, "I can't. I have other plans." The confusion on her face was almost comical, as if it had never occurred to her that I could refuse. For years, I had been their default helper, the one they leaned on when my sister wanted something, or when they needed an extra hand. But when I began quietly saying no, something shifted. My father pulled me aside one evening. His tone carried that edge of authority I had grown up fearing. "Don't make things difficult for your mother, Madeline. Your sister is going through an important stage, and she needs our support." I stared at him, my chest pounding, but my voice stayed even. "She has your support. She's always had it. What she doesn't need is mine anymore." His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. He didn't have to. He was used to me backing down. Only this time I didn't. I went upstairs, shut the door, and began boxing up my belongings. Not everything, just the things that mattered, the things they couldn't take from me. My journal, my clothes, the photo albums I'd made for myself because they'd never bothered to capture my milestones. Every taped box was a small rebellion. Every fold of clothing into a suitcase, a declaration. I was preparing to cancel my role in their lives. They thought birthdays could be rescheduled, affection postponed, loyalty demanded on command. But they had no idea I was counting down the days until I'd show them that losing me wasn't something they could pencil back in later. The breaking point came faster than I expected. My sister strutted into the kitchen one evening, tossing her purse onto the counter and announcing that she needed me to drive her across town because her boyfriend's car had broken down. She didn't ask, she commanded like always. My mother chimed in, "Madeline, be a good sister. You don't have much going on tonight anyway." The old me would have swallowed the sting of those words, grabbed the keys, and done it. But this time, I looked straight at them and said, "No." The silence that followed was sharp, almost surreal. My sister blinked as if she'd just witnessed the unthinkable. My mom's eyes narrowed, and my dad put down his newspaper, his voice dropping. "Don't start this attitude, young lady. Family helps family." My hands shook, but I didn't let my voice waver. Family also shows up for birthdays. Family doesn't erase one child for another. If you want her taken care of, you do it. I'm done. My sister scoffed, calling me dramatic, but I didn't even flinch. Instead, I walked past her, straight up to my room, and pulled out the suitcases I had packed in secret. That was when the panic set in for them. My mom followed me up, her tone switching to syrupy sweet, like a bandage over a wound she refused to admit she caused. "Madeline, don't be ridiculous. Where would you even go? You're safe here. Don't throw away everything over something so small." Something so small. Canceling my birthday, canceling my worth, canceling me. Years of being overlooked reduced to nothing more than small. I zipped the suitcase shut and looked her dead in the eye. "You canceled me first. I'm just returning the favor." I left that night. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I just slipped into my car, the one they had drained and abused for my sister's whims, and I drove away with everything that still belonged to me. They thought they owned my loyalty, that I'd always bend back into the shape they wanted. But as the streetlights blurred past, I realized for the first time in my life, I was free, and they had no idea what losing me would cost them. I didn't go far that night, just to a friend's apartment across town. She'd heard me vent before, but when she saw the bags in my arms, her face went pale. "You actually did it," she whispered, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my decision. I stayed on her couch that first week, quietly building a new routine. Every morning, I woke up to silence that wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine. I made coffee without anyone snapping at me for using the last of the milk. I went to work and came home without being ambushed by my sister's demands or my parents' endless guilt trips. It was simple, almost boring, but it felt like oxygen. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with messages that grew more frantic each day. At first, they pretended to be casual. "When are you coming back?" Then came the guilt. "We didn't mean to upset you. Don't be stubborn." And finally, the anger. "If you're going to abandon this family, don't expect anything from us again." I read every word, but I didn't reply. For once, I wasn't scrambling to explain myself, to justify why I deserved the bare minimum of respect. I let their silence stew. But what they didn't know was that I had already gone to the bank, transferred the small savings I'd built into a new account, and started the paperwork for my own place. They had always assumed I was too weak, too dependent to survive without them. And maybe I had believed that too, until I saw how peaceful life could be without the constant noise of being second best. The irony was almost poetic. They had canceled my birthday, and in doing so, they gave me the best gift I'd ever received, the clarity to cancel them right back. Weeks passed, and the distance between us grew like a canyon. My parents called less frequently once they realized I wasn't bending, but my sister, she couldn't stand the idea of losing her built-in servant. She showed up at my work one afternoon, her eyes blazing with that same entitlement I'd seen since childhood. "You're being insane, Madeline," she hissed, blocking the doorway. "You think you're punishing them, but you're only making yourself look pathetic. Who else is going to put up with you?" Her words might have cut me once, but now they just sounded hollow. I stared at her, calm, unshaken. "Anyone who actually wants me in their life," I said quietly. She scoffed, called me ungrateful, and stormed out, leaving coworkers staring after her. That night, I got another message from my mother. "Your sister is very hurt by your behavior. We raised you better than this. Stop holding grudges and come home." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel a flicker of doubt about ignoring it. I sat on my new mattress in my nearly empty apartment. Just a bed, a thrift store table, and 2 mismatched chairs. But I felt wealthier than I ever had under their roof. Because every item in that space was mine, earned by me, untouched by their constant favoritism. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It was freedom. They had canceled my birthday, my place in the family, my importance in their world, but what they hadn't counted on was how powerful I'd feel once I canceled their access to me. By the second month, their desperation turned into strategy. My father called late one evening, his tone no longer commanding but measured, almost rehearsed. "Madeline, your mother isn't well. This is stressing her. You've made your point. Now come back so we can move on." I let his words hang in the air before answering, my voice steady. "You didn't care about my well-being when you erased me on my birthday. You cared about convenience. And now that I've taken that convenience away, suddenly it matters? No, I'm not coming back." He sighed, frustrated, muttering that I was being manipulated by outside influences, as if I hadn't been living under their manipulation my whole life. The truth was, the more space I put between us, the clearer everything became. Their love had always been conditional, given when I was useful, withheld when I wasn't. And I realized something chilling. They didn't want me back. They wanted their unpaid laborer, their reliable backup plan. Without me, my sister was forced to face the world without her built-in safety net. That, more than anything, enraged them. The irony was almost laughable. By canceling me, they thought they'd proven I didn't matter. Instead, I had proven just how much they depended on me, how much their fragile balance crumbled without the daughter they never celebrated. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was the woman who finally walked away, and that was the one role they never expected me to play. The final straw came when they tried to lure me back with money. A letter showed up at my apartment, written in my mother's handwriting, though the tone screamed of my father's influence. Inside was a check, $300, with a note that read, "Let's put this behind us. We'll take you out for dinner and start fresh. Family is too important to throw away. $300. As if the years of being ignored, overlooked, and canceled could be priced so cheaply. I didn't cash it. I didn't even rip it up. I pinned it to my fridge like a reminder, a trophy of sorts. That piece of paper showed me exactly what they thought I was worth, an inconvenience they could buy off with pocket change. My sister called 2 nights later, shrill with anger, accusing me of humiliating them by parading my independence while she was struggling. She spat out, "You're punishing us for no reason. You've ruined Mom's health. You're selfish." I listened quietly, then said the words that had been building in my chest for months. "No, I'm finally being fair to myself. You canceled my birthday, my voice, my place in this family. I canceled being your doormat. That's the only thing I've ruined, and it needed to be ruined." Her gasp told me she hadn't expected me to stand so firmly. I hung up, turned off my phone, and sat in the quiet. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself or explain. My silence was louder than any argument. And as I sat there in my small apartment, surrounded by the life I had built on my own, I realized the truth. I hadn't lost a family. I had freed myself from one that never really existed. The months that followed were the hardest, and yet the most liberating I had ever known. At first, I had to learn how to live without the constant noise of obligation, without the endless demands disguised as family duties. I started working longer hours, not because anyone asked me to, but because every paycheck I brought home was mine. I bought my own groceries, decorated my tiny apartment with thrift store finds, and even adopted a stray cat that had been lingering outside my building. Each little act of independence was a stitch repairing the holes they had torn in my self-worth. But the real shift came when people outside my family began to notice me in ways my parents never had. My boss complimented me on my consistency. A coworker invited me to dinner, not because they needed something from me, but because they actually wanted my company. I found myself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in years. And yet, even in those moments of joy, my phone still lit up with their attempts to reel me back in. Voicemails layered with guilt. Messages like, "We raised you. Don't you owe us respect?" Or, "Your sister is struggling without you. How can you live with yourself?" But each word only fueled the fire in me. They didn't miss me. They missed the convenience of having someone to sacrifice. I was their backup plan, their silent cushion against consequences. Without me, they were exposed, forced to face the fallout of years of coddling my sister while neglecting me. And from what I heard through distant relatives, things weren't going well. My sister had lost her job, burned bridges with her friends, and was fighting with her boyfriend. My parents were exhausted, scrambling to pick up the pieces, and for the first time, they couldn't lean on me to make it easier. Some cousins tried to mediate, calling me and saying, "You know they love you in their own way. Maybe just forgive them. It would be easier." But I had stopped settling for easier. Easier was what kept me stuck for 27 years, swallowing my pain so everyone else could be comfortable. I didn't want easier anymore. I wanted real. One evening, sitting on my balcony with the city buzzing beneath me, I thought about that night. My birthday, the candles I never blew out, the cake I never tasted. They had erased me for the sake of my sister's date, and in that erasure, they accidentally gave me the clearest vision of my life. They thought I would always stay waiting, always accept being second best. But I had canceled that version of me along with them. And though I knew they would keep trying, I also knew something else with absolute certainty. I wasn't going back. Not to that house. Not to that role. Not to that version of myself they had trained me to be. By the time nearly a year had passed, their absence in my life felt less like a wound and more like a scar, something that once bled but had hardened into proof of survival. I had moved into a slightly bigger apartment, painted the walls the warm shade of cream I had always wanted, but never been allowed to choose back home. I hosted dinners with friends who brought wine and laughter, people who celebrated me without needing an excuse, people who didn't cancel my importance for someone else's convenience. My parents, meanwhile, had started to show cracks in their perfect facade. A distant aunt slipped me the truth during a holiday gathering I refused to attend, but still heard about. My sister's relationships had all fallen apart. She was drowning in debt, and my parents were struggling to keep her afloat. Without me there to patch holes, the ship was finally sinking. That knowledge didn't bring me joy the way I once thought it would. It brought me clarity. I hadn't ruined them. I had simply stopped rescuing them. My mother wrote me a letter in her flowing cursive, the kind that used to soothe me as a child. She didn't apologize. Not really. Instead, she wrote, "We miss the way things used to be. Your sister misses you. We all make mistakes, but we can't undo the past. Don't let pride keep you away." Pride. That word simmered in my chest like a spark waiting to burn through paper. They still couldn't see it. They still thought my absence was about pride, when in truth it was about survival, about dignity. I didn't leave because of one canceled birthday. I left because every day of my life had been a smaller version of that same cancellation. And I realized something else. My revenge hadn't been loud or dramatic. It hadn't been screaming or lawsuits or cutting them off with cruel words. My revenge was quiet, steady, undeniable. I lived well without them. I built a life where I mattered, where my existence couldn't be postponed for someone else's convenience. And that was the one thing they never expected, that I could thrive without the family that once convinced me I was nothing without them. Sitting by the window in my new home, watching the glow of city lights scatter across the glass, I whispered to myself the line I had carried since that night. You canceled me first. I just learned how to cancel you back. It didn't taste bitter anymore. It tasted like freedom. The first birthday I spent truly on my own felt nothing like the empty night that had pushed me to leave. There were no parents, no sister, no forced smiles or guilt-laced excuses. Instead, my apartment was filled with the hum of conversation, the smell of pasta simmering on the stove, and the glow of candles I lit for myself. Not because I needed anyone else to make the moment special, but because I had finally learned I was worth celebrating. My friends sang, a little off-key, and as I closed my eyes to make a wish, I realized I didn't need one. I already had everything I'd once begged my family for: recognition, respect, and a place where I belonged. The calls from home had slowed to a trickle by then, replaced with occasional cold texts about missing opportunities or veiled warnings about how blood is thicker than water. But I no longer felt the pull of their words. Blood might be thick, but love and loyalty were meant to be chosen, not demanded. My sister still stumbled from crisis to crisis, her dates and jobs fading as quickly as they appeared, while my parents exhausted themselves trying to shield her from consequences. That used to be my role, but I had canceled it, and without me, their world was unraveling in ways I no longer had to endure. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had canceled my birthday to prioritize her date, believing I would quietly accept being erased. Yet in doing so, they erased themselves from my life. They thought I would cave, that guilt would pull me back into their orbit. Instead, I built a new universe where their gravity no longer reached me. Standing on my balcony that night, the city alive with lights below me, I thought about the girl I had been, waiting, hoping, begging for her family to choose her just once. She had been silenced, dismissed, canceled over and over again. But the woman I had become had chosen herself, and that was the greatest act of defiance, the sweetest form of revenge. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about refusing to let them destroy you any longer. And in that refusal, in the quiet strength of walking away, I found my freedom. I found my life. And most of all, I found myself. So when people ask if I regret it, if I regret leaving, if I regret cutting off the people who should have loved me unconditionally, I smile and answer simply, they canceled me first. I just never let them reschedule.